If you do nothing else today, I urge you to watch the following all the way through. It is one of the best explanations of white privilege I have ever heard.
I am white, and on both sides of my family, we do not have any massive generational wealth. My mom's father is the only one of my 4 grandparents who we got any sort of generational wealth inherited from. And 99% of the wealth that we inherited from my grandfather was from selling his house. My grandfather was born in 1926 in rural North Carolina, and he was a 6'3" white man with blue eyes. Other than being white, my grandfather didn't have that many privileges. He was one of like 7 children. His mom didn't even get to high school level education, and his dad never went to college. They were not privileged in most other ways that we define privilege, but he was a white male in a very, very racist country. What his whiteness allowed him to do was work his way through college. At the time, there were colleges that weren't accepting black people, and he was accepted to college as long as he could pay for it. And he ended up getting a law degree and becoming very successful, and again, never hoarded any significant wealth, but bought a house outside of Washington, D.C. in the 50s. In a neighborhood that was redlined. And actually my mom, who was born in the 60s, remembers in the 70s when the first black family moved into their neighborhood, because it had literally been sectioned off and realtors would not sell to black families. And my mom, who is 58 years old, went to a year of segregated school. So for all of you saying, it was so long ago, everyone has equal rights now, get over it. My mom remembers when the first black student joined her class in the 70s in Alexandria, Virginia. In 2015, my grandfather died, and we sold his house that he bought for around $100,000 in the 50s, and we sold it for $1 million. That money was divided among his children, and my family was able to get out of a lot of debt, and it completely reset my ability to go to private versus public school, my ability to afford tutors, my ability to become the educated person that I am. And it was all really because I have a white grandfather. Let me finish. Had my grandfather been black and had all of the other skills and background that he had, he couldn't have gone to the schools that he went to, he wouldn't have been hired in the jobs that he was, and he couldn't have bought the house that he did, that, 65 years later, put his family out of debt. So if anyone tries to tell you it's not that deep, it really is that deep. It goes so far back. Any small privilege that a white person has is probably, to some degree, due to their whiteness. And if you are a white person who has roots in the South, you definitely should have white guilt, and you definitely should be doing the work to understand how your privilege affects the people around you and how you can help level the playing field. And everyone tried to get all particular about these specific situations where a black person might have a privilege or a woman might have a privilege over a man. Those are isolated situations you're bringing up. We're talking about large-scale, mass, systematic issues. Now, yeah, legally, black people and white people should have the same exact rights and privileges. But they're playing catch up, because if my family, like I said, had been black, we would never have gotten out of debt in 2015. I would never have been able to afford the school that I went to and live the lifestyle that I'm living right now.
When those who once ignored the fire start shouting that the house is burning, just know the truth has crossed the line. Just know the truth has crossed the color line. Grand rising kings and queens from Africa and across the ocean, welcome back to my YouTube commentary. Much love and much respect and gratitude to every awakened soul. Now, I'll say this. You are not just a viewer, but you are a witness of a global shift. Okay? For centuries, the world was comfortable with silence, especially white silence. It was the silence that kept the engine of racism running. It was the quietness that aimed or smiled politely while injustice crushed generations of black people. But right now, I'm seeing that even that silence is cracking. The white silence is cracking. Okay? Now, some white people are beginning to call out their own, are beginning to see their truth, because eyes is opening, because a lot of things is happening. We all know racism is very expensive, and being expensive, it is tough even for you to live in such a country, because it is starting to affect you personally. So some white people are beginning to call out their own. And they are saying that we cannot pretend anymore. We can't hide behind colorblind lies. Okay? From TikTok to universities, YouTube, from corporate offices to church pulpits, there is an episode of white people calling out their own. There's a new language imagining, the language of white accountability. And for generations, black people spoke truth. Black people screamed. Black people marched. Black people died, and yet many of the cries of black people fell on deaf eyes. But now some of those not deaf eyes, some of those deaf ears are hearing their own voices, are hearing their own children crying, are hearing their own family crying. So they are like, oh, white privilege is real. Racism did not die. So something have to change up. Now, this is not coincidence, it's a revelation. And before I go down into my video, I want you to watch these clips here, and then we come back with more commentary.
So I'm a white woman in this culture, and I've talked with other white women in this culture. And when I bring up the issue of privilege, I get a pushback. And what they say to me is, well, it's not my fault. But that's not the point, is it? Hey, white women, can you go into a store by yourself and expect to go in there, ask for what you want, get it, pay for it, and leave with success? You can? That's privilege. Hey, white women, when you want to use cash, credit, or a charge card or a check, and your skin color helps people feel assured about your financial stability, yes, that's privilege. Hey, fellow white women, if you want to move, can you go just about anywhere that you can afford? Can you expect your new neighbors to accept you when you move in? Probably. That's privilege. Hey, fellow white women, when you hear stories about people being celebrated for what they did to build this country, are they your color? That's privilege. Hey, fellow white women, when you're on the job and you want to speak out about something that matters, something that the other people in the room may or may not agree with you with, and you can do that without it becoming a racial issue, yes, that's privilege. Hey, fellow white women, are you afraid for your life if a traffic cop pulls you over? No? That's privilege. Hey, fellow white women, we didn't do anything to earn that privilege. We just are. We were born a certain color. And our culture has made it so that we don't have to worry about some of the things that other people do have to worry about. And we need to be sensitive to that. We need to be aware of the ways that we just walk around in the world and walk around in society and do things without a thought of how hard those very same things are for other people. We need to be aware, and we need to look in the mirror and be really clear and say, you know what, I am privileged. And I don't think that I need to be privileged above anybody else anymore. We all need to have this privilege of being safe, of being listened to, of being believed. All of that needs to belong to all of us, whether we're white or any other color. Please look in the mirror and be honest with yourself of what you've got that other people might not.
Y'all gotta stop confusing wealth privilege with white privilege. The same excuse that I always hear from the white people that want to argue it is, I've had to work hard for everything that I've got, and I wasn't handed any money or a silver spoon, and I was poor, and blah 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 fucking blah. Guess what? I was poor too growing up. Guess what? I am still to this day in my 30s a struggling single mother. Stop using the fact that you've had to work your ass off for everything having anything to do with your skin color. There's a lot of us in this country, white, black, blue, purple, green, yellow, that don't have money. That's called the middle class and the lower class. The privilege that you got is something that you don't even realize and that you take for granted every time you step out the house. You can get pulled over and not have a care or worry in the world that you're going to get pew-pewed or unalived. You could get arrested for a DUI and not have a care in the world or worry that you're going to make it to the jail alive. You can walk around the mall or a grocery store or a convenience store and not be followed around based off of how you look. I will say some people that are heavily tatted get judged, but that's besides the point. You don't have to worry about your hair being a problem on whether or not you're going to get a job position. There's a certain bias and profiling that goes on a daily basis to non-white people. But because you're white, you will never understand what it feels like to be profiled for something you never thought you would get profiled for. Now, I will give some people the benefit of the doubt, right? Your life experiences and things that you are in proximity to are going to change your perception to things. But it's just diabolical to me that racist people or people who want to claim white privilege don't exist, I will stand 10 toes down believing that Jesus and a bunch of stories in the Bible are true and a bunch of people that you ain't never seen in your goddamn life without seeing it, right? But you can't grasp your head around the fact that the things that we're talking about exist even if you haven't seen it. You can't grasp your head around the fact that just because you ain't gone through it means it doesn't exist. And even when it exists, right, it's not something that you should feel defensive about. It's not something you can help, unfortunately. So the least you could do is be empathetic to it, right? The least you could do is recognize it and acknowledge it, right? The least you could do is not minimize other people's experiences and feelings about it, right? Like if stubborn was a race, I swear to God, it would be white people. It's not like you have to kiss people's feet and bow down. All people are saying is, hey, we just want you to understand, acknowledge, and empathize. And a lot of y'all don't have loved ones or people that you truly care about that you've watched go through shit. Because if you did, you would not have the same perception as some of us. And that's just a factual piece of information, whether you want to admit it to yourself or not. Out of sight, out of mind does not pertain to this concept. Like I said in part 1, some of y'all want to stay delusional. I'm not going to be delusional with you. I get that there's always going to be the exception to the rule, but you cannot sit here and act like millions and millions and millions of people are just pulling this shit out their ass. The quicker people start listening to comprehend and understand instead of listening to respond is when we'll finally make some progress. Y'all be safe out there.
This could cost me followers, and if it does, I'm okay, because I know I've lost the right ones. In 2024, if you don't understand that white privilege doesn't equal financial privilege, there's a good chance it's because you choose to be willfully ignorant. White privilege doesn't mean that you grew up rich or that you didn't have a hard life. It's the concept that by the mere coincidence of you being born white or white presenting, that you have an inherent privilege. You're afforded certain benefits of the doubt that not everyone gets. It's the difference from a white person walking into a store and a customer salesperson walking up and saying, "Hi, can we help you find something today?" To a black person walking in that same store with that same customer service person following them around because they looked kind of suspicious. It's the black family that can't leave their family photos hanging on the wall when they're selling their house because the home appraiser might undervalue their house by as much as $500,000. And for fuck's sakes, you've never had to apologize for being white. Had your parents fucked on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday, you wouldn't even be you. Rather, just acknowledge that the system that was designed by and for people that look like you has never been a level playing field. I hope this made it clear. Have a great fucking weekend.
White privilege does not mean that just because you're white, you are going to be more privileged than every person of color. It just means that any struggles or misfortunes you do experience are not caused by your whiteness.
You get privilege, you don't have to work as hard, you can slack off in jobs and still get promoted and still not have to worry about somebody coming after you. So whiteness to me is about privilege and access to information systems and people and power that you didn't earn.
Having white privilege does not mean that you've never suffered. It doesn't mean that you've floated through life on a cotton candy unicorn cloud of rainbows and sprinkles. It doesn't mean that you've never experienced abuse and poverty, indignation, betrayal, and all these horrible, terrible, difficult things. What it means, very simply, is that your life has not been made harder because of your skin tone, like it has been for black and brown people. Because we live in a racist, just inherently racist system, it is harder for them because of their skin tone than it is for us white people. That is all that means. You can still experience hard things and poverty. You can still have a really shitty life as a white person. That's not what white privilege means. It just means that it's not been shitty because you're white.
If there was white privilege, why was I always poor?
Yeah, his ideas about white privilege are all over the place. At one point he said, if I have white privilege, why did my mom, my dad, and my grandfather die? Because we're not vampires. There's not immortality. But a lot of people ask, if I have white privilege, why was I poor or why did I struggle? Because it doesn't mean you won't do those things. It just means you won't do those things because you are white. Many groups have the same struggles you faced, plus others based solely on the color of their skin, and the fact that you don't experience those is privileged. In fact, you're so privileged you don't even realize those struggles exist. In one of his examples, he almost stumbles on the point. He says, if I'm standing with 5 black men and a police officer comes up, they assume I'm the one who's up to no good, completely missing the fact that they're saying you're guilty by association. If you're here with the likes of them, you must be up to no good. And yet all of those men are 7.5 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of a murder than you are. And the odds are even greater if the victim was white. Oh, and if all of you got popped for drug possession, they're 12 times more likely to be convicted on that drug possession than you are. How about we say all of you are applying for a mortgage to buy a home? You're more likely to be approved than they are. In fact, in 2021, an AI bias caused 80% of black mortgage applicants to be denied. And an AI isn't automatically biased, it has to be taught that. And it's not like someone sat down and typed, be racist. It looked at the system already in place, it saw the bias that already exists, and it applied it itself. Now let's say you and all those guys get approved, get your homes, then a few years later, you all decide to sell in the same market. You will almost certainly get more money for your home than they will for theirs. Like this black family who had their home appraised and it came back being worth $472,000 and they thought that was low. So they had a white friend stand in as them, removed family photos, and the same house was appraised at being worth $750,000. And the examples go on and on. You don't have violent stereotypes associated with the color of your skin. You're more likely to be shown in a favorable light in the media, even if you've done something wrong. It isn't hard to find characters in books and movies and television that look and sound like you. But perhaps the greatest example of white privilege is when white people say, I think racism would go away if we just stopped talking about it. Because for many, their only exposure to racism is in media and conversation. They don't actively experience it. And not experiencing it is in itself a privilege. If a terrible thing is happening in the world and the only thing you have to do to remove it from your life is to change the channel, that is privilege.
Welcome back. To understand this awakening that is here right now, the white silence, the weight of white silence, and they are coming out and talking. To understand this, we must first understand what white silence meant. Okay? Silence was not ignorance. Silence, it was insurance. Okay? It was insurance. It was protected comfort. It protected access. It protected superiority. It dressed as normality. You know, every system, law, education, media had unspoken rules. Okay? White is default, black is deviation. As you have heard from those videos of white people, they are talking something that black people have already knew about this. They are just helping to echo the sounds that black people have been shouting for too long. Okay? So when injustice happened, the rule was simple. Don't talk about it too loud. Keep peace by keep lies. Keep peace by keeping lies. Okay? But family is built on lies is not peace. Peace built on lies, it's poison covered in perfume. And this is why figures like James Baldwin said not everything that is faced can be changed. Okay? But nothing can be changed until it is faced. That's a quote from James Baldwin. And right now, for the first time in a long time, some white people are facing it publicly, are facing it loudly and fearlessly. It did not happen overnight. The unalivement of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmed Abari, these tragedies cracked open a collective consciousness. Okay? Millions saw what black people had been saying for centuries, that the system doesn't function. It perfumes or it performs exactly as designed. And that was the spark that made even some white hearts uncomfortable enough to question, if I say nothing, I am part of this design. And soon after, we saw corporate apologies, university statements, and new social movements. And yet behind all that noise, there was something deeper, genuine reflection. White teenagers began questioning their school textbooks. White mothers started asking their churches why Jesus was always painted as white. White journalists began calling out racist policies within their own institution. And this is not about guilty anymore. This is about the truth. Generation Z or Gen Z changed the game. Okay? This is the role of generation shift. This generation was born with the internet, exposed to the perspective their parents never saw. And they watched police brutality on the screens, and they listened to Malcolm X. They listened to Tupac Shakur. They saw African excellence shining online. They have seen Nigerian tech. They have seen Kenyan creators They have seen South African activism. They have seen Caribbean consciousness. And these young white voices has begun asking hard questions to their elders. Why did you stay quiet? Why do we live in neighborhoods divided in color? Why are all of our teachers white? And that questioning is what scares the establishment the most. Not rebellion, but awareness, because awareness destroys illusion. Okay? Calling out racism in others is easy, but calling out racism in yourself, in your family, in your community, that's where courage begins. So today, we see white creators confronting racist relatives on camera. Okay, we see white professors challenging colleges. We see white pastors confessing that that Sunday at 11 a.m. is still the most segregated hour in America. Some have lost friends, some have lost jobs, some, but they gained truth, and truth has no price tag, because privilege that goes unchecked becomes poison, but privilege confronted becomes purpose. And when those who were born into power use it to dismantle the system that gave it, that's when we move from allyship to transformation. Okay? On the African view, from an African spiritual lens, this is not new. Our ancestors always say the truth buried shall one day rise through the children of the liars. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Some of these white youths are the descendants of the colonizers, okay? But they are awakening with the spirit of repair. They carry ancestral debt they didn't create, yet their souls push them towards justice. And this is the universe balancing itself. Because God, the creator, God the source, whatever name you use, never allows oppression to stand forever. Okay? The same energy that kept black people alive through chains and fire is the same energy now forcing truth out of those who once denied it. And this awakening is not about white saviors. This awakening is about universal justice. When truth becomes undeniable, even the benefactors of lies must confess. And yet, we must be courteous. We must be conscious as black people. Every awakening brings pretenders. And some will perform awareness for life, not liberation. Some will profit from guilt instead of dismantling greed. Okay? So our duty as black people, our duty as conscious Africans and descendants of Africa is to separate performance from purpose. Okay? We must welcome truth but guard our power, because for centuries we have been studied, for centuries we have been copied, for centuries we have been intimidated, okay? Or imitated, but they never created us or respected us, okay? Now as white people begin to speak, we must ensure that the center of this conversation remains where it belongs, on black voices. Let us be the center, okay? On black voices, on black history, on black liberation, okay? As the great Andrew Lauder said, the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house. But when the master starts breaking his own tools, that's when the house begins to collapse. And the most powerful transformation we can witness is not apology, it's action. We need actions as black people. Accountability. Because we are seeing some white activists redirect their wealth to black businesses, they support African development and advocate for reparations. So we are also seeing a few white educators revise curriculum or to include African civilization that existed long before Greece or Rome. They are including kingdoms like Kush, Mali, Kemet, okay? And that rewriting of history is liberation or a work, okay? Because colonization didn't only steal land, but it stole memory. And when the colonizers begins to remember the truth that Africa was the light of civilization, then the illusion of superiority of superior ends. Okay? Now, I'll say this. Racism is not random. Okay? Racism is not random hatred. Racism, it is structured advantage. It is an entire architecture built to guarantee that one group always stays at the top. So from colonial borders in Africa to redlined neighborhoods in America, every policy was a brick in that architecture. White supremacy wasn't just cultural pride, but it was economic engineering. Look at how land was distributed after slavery. Freed Africans were promised 40 acres and a mule. Most never received it. And meanwhile, white settlers received free land through the Homestead Act. Okay? And that single act transferred millions of acres of native and black land into white ownership, creating intergenerational wealth disguised as hard work. Okay? So today, when a white family sells their great-grandfather farmland, that is the fruit of policy. But when black family struggles to own a home, that is the root of policy too. Privilege was never invisible. It was institutional, okay? And white privilege needed education to survive. Not true education, but indonication, or you call it indoctrination, okay? Schools became factories of amnesia. Students were taught that Africa was a dark until Europe discovered it. They learned about the great explorers, not the civilization they invaded. They memorized the names of colonizers, but never the names of the empires they destroyed. And that's why so many white people grew up thinking racism is only about slurs, not structures. Right now in 2025, some of their children are breaking the spell. They are reading Frantz Fanon's the Wretched of the Earth. They are watching documentaries about Patrice Lumumba and Thomas Sankara. They are learning that the world was not created when Europe woke up. It was disrupted when Europe invaded. And this realization changes everything, because once you see the architecture of privilege, you can't survive and see it. Okay? Now, white privilege is inherited power. White privilege is like oxygen, unseen but necessary for their effort. Every poor white people, for example, though struggling economically but still benefit socially from whiteness. Police are less likely to shoot them. Judges are more lenient. Media calls them troubled instead of thugs. And right now, some of them are saying it openly. There's a video I saw, a white lady saying our grandparents wasn't educated, but he went up gaining wealth because of the white privilege. They are admitting that we didn't earn safely. We were born into it. And that honesty threatened the entire mythology, the myth of meritocracy. Because if the system was fair, why are the richest nations the same ones that colonize others? If equality existed, why do Africans' resources still feed Western prosperity? If justice was blind, why are prisons filled with melanin? There are some questions white consciousness now wrestles with. Questions that black people have been screaming for centuries, okay? Let's be real, family. Many white people avoided talking about privilege because it shattered their self-image. So to admit privilege is to admit theft, okay? Not always personal theft, but historical theft that killed the comfort that you are living in as a white man. And that's why even progressive white people used to say that I don't see color. But not seeing color was never enlightenment. Not seeing color, it was erasure. It erased black pain. It erased black beauty and black contribution. And right now, more white people, more white thinkers are calling it out. And they say, if you don't see color, then you don't see me. Even psychologists are exploring the guilty and fragility that comes when whiteness is challenged. Robin DiAngelo called it white fragility. That defensive reaction when privilege is exposed. Okay? That fragility stopped conversations before they began. But in this new age of the truth, fragility is giving way to accountability. Now, for a moment in Europe, for example, the old empires like Britain, France, Portugal, Belgium, these empires are being forced to face their colonial ghost. Museums are returning stolen African artifacts. Politicians are admitting that colonialism was not civilization but exploitation. Germany, to be precise, has formally apologized to the genocide of the Herero and Nama people of Namibia. France is still wrestling with the truth about Algeria, and even the Vatican. Yes, the Vatican has begun speaking about the sin of the doctrine of discovery that justified colonization. But who is pushing these conversations? That's my question. Who is pushing these conversations? It is not government. People, white scholars, white journalists, youths. They are demanding that their nations fade the blood beneath their flags. And that's why awakening look like not pity but reckoning. Every civilization has a mirror moment, and it is time when it must look to itself honestly. For whiteness, that mirror moment is now. White people are realizing that privilege is not just an individual blessing. It's a collective illusion maintained by silence, and silence is crumbling. Okay? You can see on podcast, white hosts are challenging their own guests. On social media, white influencers are telling followers, don't center us, listen to black voices. In churches, we see white pastors are confessing that Christianity was weaponized and justifies slavery. They are calling it out. So this mirror movement terrifies the establishment, because once you see truth, you can't return to the lie. And that's why some reactionary forces are fighting back with anti-vax movements, banning books, writing history, criminalized. So they fear they are awakened because truth threatens power. Okay? Now listen. While white people awaken, we must remain grounded. Their awakening is not our salvation. It is our confirmation. Okay? It confirms what our ancestors always said, that the oppressor cannot sleep forever when the oppressed keeps praying, when the oppressed keep creating, when the oppressed keep rising. Okay? So this is our season to educate them, but never to depend on them. We must remain the authors of our own narrative, of our own stories. When white people speak against privilege, we must guide them towards transformation, not applause. When they use their platforms, we must ensure they share power, not attention. Because true allyship is not about comfort, it's about cost. If their awakening costs them nothing, then it's just performance. But if it costs them friends, influence, and security, that's conviction. Okay? Now, I'll say this. Some of these voices that are waking up, for example, we have educator like Jane Elliott, who continues teaching that racism is a bland disease. We have author like Tim Wise, who says white silence is racial violence. Even across the musicians are joining in, acknowledging privilege and calling for reparations. So these are not perfect people, but they are necessary bridges, because when truth starts echoing from both sides of the color line, it multiplies faster than censorship can contain it. Okay? But I always say, make no mistake, as my black people, this movement is not temporary. It is spiritual. It is generational and global. Okay? The same spirit that made Africans reclaim their identity is the same energy now whispering inside Europeans' souls, saying that you build your comfort on someone else's pain. It is time. It is time to atone. In an African philosophy, Ubuntu, we say, I am because we are. And this means justice is not vengeance. Justice, it is restoration. So when we see white people awakening, we must channel that energy towards balance, not guilty, but just to repair. Africa doesn't need apology to us. Africa needs equality. The diaspora does not need pity, it needs partnership. And this family is where our responsibility begins, to ensure that awakening translates to restructuring. So if they are truly awake, they must help dismantle unfair trade system, must help dismantle the debt traps, and they must help us to dismantle the media propaganda that still paints Africa as needy while stealing her wealth. I have a lot to say, but I want to finish here by saying that stay woke, my people. White awakening is not the end of racism, but it's the beginning of accountability. And we, the children of Africa, stand as both whiteness and teachers of this new era. Until the next episode, peace out.